Hi, everybody. We did our first read of the medicine bag yesterday. Today, we're going to dive a little bit deeper. So, in order to do that, I need you to log on to ClassLink and find the Pearson EasyBridge app. We're going to click on My Perspectives, ELA National Grade 8. And it should take you here. If you would happen to get kicked out, or if it would say that you needed to sign back in, all you need to do is just go back to ClassLink and click on it one more time, and it should work. We're going to click on the textbook. We're going to click on Student Edition. We're going to open that in a new window. And from here, we're going to click on Whole Class Learning. We're going to scroll down to the medicine bag. And it takes us back to the story. One thing that I would do for today, I would click this hide option up here, just because you are able to see more of the text when you do that. One of the things that I really like about this story is that the author is Lakota, and the reservation that Grandpa comes from is Rosebud. If you're not sure where that is, it's really not too far from here. This is South Dakota, or part of South Dakota. Sioux Falls is right here. This is actually where I live, but the school is probably closer to where the name is. And if you look to the left, you're going to see that it says Rosebud Indian Reservation. That is the reservation that Martin's grandpa is from. Yesterday, we did a couple of comprehension check questions to finish the day, so I just quickly want to go over those. The first question was, what makes Grandpa sound glamorous to the narrator's friends? Grandpa sounds glamorous to his friends because in their minds, they're picturing him like he's a character from TV or from the movies. Many different places in this country, people don't really know what it means to be Native American, more than just what they have seen on TV or movies or read in books. And so they kind of have this fictional figure in their head of what they think Grandpa might look like. Number 2, what happens when Grandpa arrives at Martin's house? He faints because of heat exhaustion. He made that long journey by himself, and he just got too tired and too hot. The third question I asked you was, why does Grandpa want Martin to have the medicine bag? Well, the first reason why is because Martin's grandpa feels like he might die soon. He knows that he's older, he's getting closer to the end of his life, and so he knows that he needs to pass that medicine bag down to Martin to keep with tradition. This medicine bag gets passed down to the sons in the family. So Grandpa had gotten it from his father, and Grandpa's son died with no sons. So now it will go to Martin, who is Grandpa's great-grandson. The fourth question I asked you was, what is in the medicine bag and what does Martin add to it at the end of the story? This was a 2-part question. The medicine bag holds a piece of iron from Grandpa's father, a pebble from the butte where he went for his vision quest, and a piece of sacred sage. At the end of this story, Martin is at Rosebud and he adds more sacred sage from the reservation. I also asked you to write a short summary of the medicine bag. You should have included these points. Martin is initially embarrassed when his grandpa shows up. Grandpa has come to give Martin his medicine bag. Martin doesn't want the medicine bag. He's not really sure what it means, and he doesn't want to have to wear it in front of his friends. But eventually, after he has that sit-down conversation with his grandpa, he understands how important it is to him and how important it is to his family to carry on that tradition. And he accepts the medicine bag, and he also accepts his Native American heritage. We're going to go ahead and just go over some of the important parts of this story. We know that this is a nonfiction narrative, which means that it is based on true events. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to look at paragraph 1. And as you're looking at paragraph 1, I want you to find 2 or 3 details that describe Grandpa's appearance. So you're looking for 2 or 3 details that describe Grandpa's appearance. Grandpa wasn't tall and stately like TV Indians. His hair wasn't in braids. It hung in stringy gray strands on his neck, and he was old. He was my great-grandfather, and he didn't live in a teepee. He lived all by himself in a part log, part tar paper shack on the Rosebud Reservation in South Dakota. When I think about the description of Grandpa, I think about these first couple of sentences. He wasn't tall and stately. His hair wasn't in braids. He had stringy gray strands on his neck, and he was old. I think that those are the things that describe what he looks like. I think this is important to note because, again, sometimes what is portrayed on TV when it comes to Native Americans is mainly just stereotypes that create distorted expectations for Native Americans. This is also an important part of the story because right away they're laying the groundwork to explain why Martin might be a little bit embarrassed by his grandpa and his appearance. His grandpa doesn't technically live up to the expectations that his friends might have of him, even though once they meet him, they end up adoring him. For the next close reading question, I want you to go to paragraph 18. In paragraph 18, we find that Martin's younger sister, Cheryl, has a much different reaction to Grandpa arriving. So I'm going to read through this section, and I want you to think about how does she greet Grandpa, and why do you think that their reactions are so different? As we supported him up the steps, the door banged open, and Cheryl came bursting out of the house. She was all smiles and was so obviously glad to see Grandpa that I was ashamed of how I felt. "Grandpa!" she yelled happily. "You came to see us!" Grandpa smiled, and Mom and I let go of him as he stretched out his arms to my 10-year-old sister, who was still young enough to be hugged. One of the things that we have already seen is that Martin is a little bit unhappy and embarrassed that his grandpa has showed up. However, when Cheryl sees her grandpa, she responds to him directly. It says that she came bursting out of the house. She was smiling and was so obviously glad to see Grandpa. She gave him a huge hug. She was really happy to see him. So my question would be, why are their greetings so different? What's different about Cheryl and about Martin? The obvious difference between the two of them is their age. Martin is at an age, now that he's a teenager, where his friends' opinions really influence his actions and his feelings. So he's feeling a little bit conflicted between loyalty to his family and then the feelings of judgment from his friends if they, are disappointed that his grandpa doesn't live up to the expectations that Martin has set up for his friends. Cheryl doesn't really seem to care about those things. She's just a kid. She's just happy because her grandpa's there. This might be because she's younger and maybe is a little less concerned about people needing to look or dress a certain way. Next, we're going to go to paragraph 31 and 32. The author uses language in paragraphs 31 and 32 that shows how difficult Grandpa's journey was. So as I read this to you, I want you to take note of the details that explain how hard it was for Grandpa to get there. "I never thought that Grandpa would be lonely after our visits, and none of us noticed how old and weak he had become. But Grandpa knew, so he came to us. He had ridden on buses for 2.5 days. When he arrived in the city, tired and stiff from sitting for so long, he set out walking to find us. He had stopped to rest on the steps of some building downtown, and a policeman found him. The officer took Grandpa to the city bus stop, waited until the bus came, and then told the driver to let Grandpa out at Bellevue Drive. After Grandpa got off the bus, he started walking again, but he couldn't see the house numbers on the other side when he walked on the sidewalk, so he walked in the middle of the street. That's when all the little kids and dogs followed him. As I read through those paragraphs, I noticed that Grandpa traveled on buses for 2.5 days. That is a really long time to be sitting on a bus. I also see that it tells what happened to Grandpa after he arrived in the city and then what happened after he arrived in the narrator's neighborhood. He obviously was not familiar with the area. The police officer had to help him find the city bus stop and then told the driver where to take Grandpa. But even once Grandpa was on that road, he still was having a hard time seeing the street numbers. It also said Grandpa was old and weak, and so to make that kind of journey just shows how strongly Grandpa felt about getting the medicine bag to Martin. So my next question would be, why does the author provide so much detail about the journey? Again, I think that it's because the author wants you to understand that this was a really big deal for Grandpa. They wanted to show how hard it was for him to get there and that he just really didn't know much about the city. This shows me that when I think about Grandpa's courage, or I'm sorry, when I think about Grandpa's personality, I feel like he has quite a bit of courage to do something like this at such an old age when he is physically not quite as strong. He obviously is a very persistent person to see this journey through. Next, we're going to find paragraphs 50 and 51. This is the part of the story where Martin's friends finally come over. And when they come over, Grandpa was sitting on the porch. He had his fancy clothes on, his leather vest that's trimmed with beads. He's got his moccasins on his feet, all of those things. And Martin says in paragraph 49, I stared just as my friends did, and I heard one of them murmur, wow. They're just taken aback by how Grandpa looks and, just how awesome all of his clothing is. I'm going to read paragraphs 50 and 51, and I want you to think about Grandpa's actions here. Grandpa looked up, and when his eyes met mine, they twinkled as if he were laughing inside. He nodded to me, and my face got all hot. I could tell that he had known all along I was afraid he'd embarrass me in front of my friends. How, Haxilas? Boys. He greeted and held out his hand. When I read these paragraphs, I notice a couple things. I notice that when Grandpa looked at Martin, his eyes twinkled as if he were laughing on the inside. So I think that this just shows that Grandpa knew what Martin was feeling and Martin didn't even have to say it. What do these actions suggest about Grandpa's characters? I think that this also shows that he remembers what it's like to be a young person and that he understands that Martin might have been embarrassed about him before this moment. And, I think that this kind of changes how Martin sees his grandpa. He obviously has a lot of respect for his grandpa, and I think that it really was a big step in their relationship. We're going to skip down again to paragraphs 58 through 60. And I want you to be thinking about what the text says and how it tells you what Martin is feeling. That evening, Grandpa called me to his room before he went to sleep. Tomorrow, he said, when you come home, it will be time to give you the medicine bag. I felt a hard squeeze from where my heart is supposed to be and was scared, but I answered, okay, Grandpa. All night I had weird dreams about thunder and lightning on a high hill. From a distance I heard the slow beat of a drum. When I woke up in the morning, I felt as if I hadn't slept at all. At school it seemed as if the day would never end, and when it finally did, I ran home. Some of the details that I think point out how he was feeling would be in paragraph 59. I felt a hard squeeze from where my heart is supposed to be. Also in paragraph 60, He says he hasn't slept at all, and it seemed like the day would never end, like he was just dying to get home and to have this conversation, but at the same time was also very scared. So it was a mixture of being scared and being anxious. The author chose to include this information because it just reinforces the fact that Martin is scared and nervous about receiving the medicine bag. He doesn't know what to expect. He doesn't know what his grandpa's going to say to him, and so that uneasiness is just really getting to him. And I think that this suggests that Martin is a little nervous about receiving the medicine bag because he's starting to recognize how important it is, and that, it's a big responsibility to participate in this sacred traditional Native American ritual. He knows that when Grandpa says it's time to give him the medicine bag, that it means Grandpa's probably going to die soon, and he probably is also a little saddened by that. The last section we're going to look at is paragraphs 66. And we're going to be reading that paragraph and thinking about the details that the author uses to describe Iron Shell's experience. Then a terrible thing happened to Iron Shell. He and several other young men were taken from their homes by the soldiers and sent to a boarding school far from home. He was angry and lonesome for his parents and for the young girl he had wed before he was taken away. At first, Iron Shell resisted the teacher's attempts to change him, and he did not try to learn. One day, it was his turn to work in the school's blacksmith shop. As he walked into the place, he knew that his medicine had brought him there to learn and work with the white man's iron. As I read this paragraph, I noticed the words and details that tell me how Iron Shell felt at the boarding school. It says he was angry and he was lonesome for his parents. He also had just gotten married and was ripped away from the woman that he had married. He didn't try to learn while he was there because he was angry. I don't think any of us could blame him for that. However, when he walked into the place, he knew that he was there to learn how to work with iron. And I think that Grandpa is telling Martin this story of Iron Shell to teach him the history of the medicine bag and to also understand what the medicine bag is and to connect him with his Native American heritage. One of the things we can conclude about Grandpa's belief in fate and destiny is that he does believe that fate and destiny play a role in a person's life. He believes that, what's meant for you is not going to miss you. And he says that by that last line, that Iron Shell knew the medicine brought him there to learn and work with the white man's iron, even though he was really angry about it. After this experience, he was able to go back to his reservation, and he was able to be a blacksmith and work there. Unfortunately, the boarding schools were not a work of fiction. They really existed. Young Native American men and women were ripped from their homes, from their families, and were sent to boarding schools in the attempt to try to assimilate them to white culture and to strip away their Native American cultures. And I don't know if you remember, but we did do a quick book talk about a book that surrounds this idea called Sweetgrass Basket. It's probably still close to the front board. Dr. Robertson knows a lot more about this than I do. But if you are interested in this topic, this would maybe be a good book to read or a good place to start. The last thing you're going to do today for the medicine bag is you are going to fill out this close reading Google form. I do expect your answers to be at least 2 sentences long. You have a few questions here. Do you think Grandpa made the right decision to travel and visit his family? Do you think that it was worth the personal risk to himself? Do you think he should have stayed home? Do you think he should have called them and told him, them to come visit him? Do you think that he made the right decision? And make sure you use some details from the story to support your answer. What happens to Grandpa and Martin at the end of the story? Again, use some details from the story to support your conclusion. And what have you learned about the path to growing up by reading this story? Think about how Martin changed from the beginning of the story to the end of the story when he is standing on the reservation. I'm looking forward to reading your answers. Have a great day.